there, YouTube, and welcome to another exciting, revolting, and utterly disgusting episode of Sex in the Watchtower. In case you're new to this video series, this video is not safe for work, unless you have a really fun job. And there will be adult language here. Please wear headphones if there are kids around. Please. Our first article for today is called Parents, Safeguard Your Children. It's from the Watchtower in 1998.
In a Nigerian secondary school, a girl who was notorious for sexual immorality was fond of lecturing fellow female students on matters of sex.
My! Oh boy, here we go. It's the slutty schoolgirl meme.
One of her prescriptions for abortion was stout beer heavily drugged with a tobacco substance.
So this girl is lecturing and giving out prescriptions? What was this, a secondary medical school? Is she on the faculty or something? Also, fun fact, the main ingredient that makes tobacco popular, that being nicotine, is actually quite poisonous in large quantities. Here in North Carolina, where a lot of tobacco products are still grown and produced, you'll hear tons of stories about people who worked in tobacco fields just getting sick from handling the leaves too much. So I would think that ingesting it would be a really bad idea. So, the slutty schoolgirl meme gives bad medical advice. I'm shocked.
Her stories, which she culled from pornographic literature, enthralled many of her fellow students.
Oh my. Okay. So this seems like a case of dumb kids making up stories. Why is this news? And why are we reading about it in a religious magazine?
Some began to experiment with sex.
Because, you know, a bunch of teenagers would never do such a thing if not for this little slut and her porno stories.
And one of them became pregnant. To induce an abortion, she drank the stout tobacco concoction. Within a few hours, she began to vomit blood. A few days later, she died in the hospital.
If this is true, it's tragic. I doubt it's true, though. I mean, it sounds suspiciously made up like many of the experiences recounted in the Watchtower. But notice the point here, in case you missed it, though I'm not sure how you could. Talking about sex, thinking about sex, and especially having sex will kill you.
In today's world, many youth speak unceasingly about sex, bringing ruin to credulous listeners.
Oh. Well, you know, it seems to me that there's more bad sex advice in the Watchtower than in your average schoolyard, but what do I know?
To whom should youngsters turn to find accurate knowledge that will safeguard them?
Not the Jehovah's Witnesses.
How fine it is when they can look to their godly parents who have the responsibility to raise them in the discipline and mental regulating of Jehovah.
Oh, please. If by godly parents they mean people who read and believe this dreck, then Houston, we have a problem. Not to mention the fact that Jehovah's Witness parents teach their kids to ignore their gut and their inner voice. The heart is treacherous, after all, in favor of Jehovah's Witness instructions, and Jehovah's Witness parents ignore their own instincts regularly, particularly if their child is hurt or sick or needs a blood transfusion or, God forbid, gets sexually abused by someone at the Kingdom Hall. These godly parents, in many cases, will listen to the elders and the Watchtower Society, and they won't report what happened to the appropriate authorities. In fact, my godly parents were stellar examples when it came to this. My dad didn't talk about sex at all if he could help it, and my mom couldn't stop talking about it. Mental regulating indeed.
In some African cultures, it is considered obscene to mention such sex-related words as penis, semen, and menstruation. One Christian mother even forbade her daughter to use the word sex, though she said the daughter could use the word fornication. In contrast, God's word, the Bible, speaks with frankness about sex and the sexual organs. The purpose of this is not to shock or excite, but to protect and instruct God's people.
So the Watchtower is considered obscene in some African cultures then? Good for them. Leave them alone, Watchtower. It's not your job to correct their culture. They didn't ask for your opinion. If they don't want to talk about sex incessantly, then for Christ's sakes, don't make them. Also, there may be many ways to describe the Bible's treatment of sex and sexual organs, but Frank, is not the one I would choose. Strange, maybe. Barbaric, perhaps. Wrong. That's a good one. Backward? Gross, even.
Youngsters may also fear that inquiries about sexual matters will bring bad consequences.
Like judicial committees?
A 16-year-old girl said, "I do not discuss sex problems with my parents because of the way they react to such things."
Like calling the elders.
Some time ago, my senior sister asked Mom some questions relating to sex. Instead of Mom helping her with her problem, she became suspicious of her intentions. Often, Mom would call me and inquire about my sister, at times making insinuations about her morals. I don't want to risk losing Mom's love for me, so I keep my problems away from her.
Yeah, kids, your parents might stop loving you if you have sex. Hell, you don't even have to do it. Your parents might stop loving you if you even ask about sex. Assuming, of course, that they actually love you in the first place, that is. And totally not considering the fact that if they hadn't had sex, you wouldn't even be here. That's right, y'all. Every single one of us is here because their parents got it on.
A 13-year-old girl committed fornication because she was told by a schoolmate that if she did not lose her virginity, she would suffer terrible pain in the future.
My!
They will cut your hymen with scissors, she was told.
What the hell? Okay, it's bad enough if someone was saying this, but why does Watchtower feel the need to put it in print for millions of people to read?
When asked later why she did not tell her Christian mother what she had heard, the girl replied that such matters were never discussed with adults.
Hold up. Are they actually encouraging Jehovah's Witness girls to ask their parents about sex? Why? When the answer is always going to be, shame, shame, shame. Anything sexual is wrong. So basically, same, but different.
19-year-old Kunle said, "My parents have helped me to withstand pressures from worldly women for free sex."
What? All right. This is a long-standing Jehovah's Witness myth that if Jehovah's Witness boys were out in the world, those harlotty worldly women would just be throwing themselves at them. Not just sex, y'all. Copious quantities of free sex. Oh my God, this is the biggest crock of bullshit ever propagated. I swear, y'all. Ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, guys, y'all need to testify here. When you left the Jehovah's Witnesses, were you disappointed that the mythical free drugs and sex never materialized? Or did they? I've heard this from tons of people, and I actually believed the same things. But it's just not true. And anyway, how would this boy's parents help him withstand sexual pressures? Because that just sounds unhealthy, incestuous perhaps. Gross!
"If it wasn't for the training they gave me, I would have fallen into sin. I will always appreciate what they did."
What do they do exactly? And think about this. He is saying that his parents trained him not to fall into sin. And by sin, they mean sex. But y'all, you don't fall into sex. You just don't.
Bola, mentioned earlier, said, "I had a classmate who said that sex is to be enjoyed without any commitment to marriage. To her, it was fun. However, she found it was no fun when she got pregnant and could not write the school certificate examination with us. If I did not have a good father to guide me, perhaps I could have been like her, learning the hard way."
Okay, Bola. I hate to tell you this, but your classmate did not get pregnant just because she had sex without being married first. Okay, she got pregnant because she did not use birth control or contraception. Sex is fun if you're doing it right, and it can be enjoyed without signing your life away. Also, the logic here is just a little bit iffy. I mean, presumably the sex was still fun, right? But the missing school and being knocked up part probably wasn't. Still, your father, honey, is not responsible for your sexuality. You are. Perhaps you would have been like her, and perhaps you wouldn't. But it would have been you making the choice and not your daddy. Because if your father is actively making sexual decisions for you, that's just not cool. Gross.
What a blessing when Christian parents help their children become wise for salvation in this sex-mad world. Their Bible-based instruction is like a precious necklace.
A pearl necklace?
That adorns and beautifies children in the eyes of God.
Oh man, this is just a very unfortunate choice of words. Our next article is from The Awake in 1999, and it's called The crisis is worldwide.
The fact is that the vast majority of abuse is perpetrated by parents and other close relatives.
In other news, water is wet.
Other research confirms this finding and also indicates that trusted family friends have at times groomed the child and family for later, well-planned abuse of the child. Incest is the most shocking betrayal of trust.
And sometimes child abusers even use religion to groom the children so that they are compliant victims. How amazing that Watchtower is talking about this as if they themselves aren't some of the worst perpetrators of this kind of thing on the planet.
Sexual abuse by pedophiles is another threat to children throughout the world.
Isn't that the same threat we were just talking about?
Trends and Issues in Crime and Criminal Justice gives this definition. Pedophilia refers to sexual attraction towards the very young. Pedophilia invariably involves the commission of crimes such as sexual assault, indecency, and offenses relating to child pornography.
But never, ever members of Jehovah's Witness congregations. Never.
Sickening reports of pedophile rings which greedily exploit children sexually are flooding in from all over the world.
Flooding into whom? Watchtower? From congregation elders who are instructed to call the branch first instead of the authorities?
The victims are both young boys and young girls. Lured by unscrupulous men, they are sexually abused and then threatened or lavishly spoiled to encourage them to remain with the club.
Oh my.
The men who plan and perform these vile acts are often prominent leaders of the community and sometimes do so with the full knowledge and protection of the police and the judiciary.
Or the elders. You know, whatever. Oh, hi, Carson. I've said it a million times by this point, but why are they talking about this so often, and why are they so very, very, very well informed about the operations of pedophile rings? I smell a rat.
Sexual abuse of children by clergymen is also causing outrage. News reports from all over the world reveal the extent of child abuse by clergymen, sometimes even in the name of God. For example, a convicted Anglican priest told his 10-year-old victim that God was speaking through him, the clergyman, and anything he did or anything the boy did was loved by God and therefore right.
But when the headlines are about Jehovah's Witness clergy perpetrating the same kind of abuse, or at the very least covering it up, it's all fake news, apostate lies, Satan trying to bring reproach on Jehovah's great and holy name. Or something.
In Australia, a review of the book The Battle and the Backlash, The Child Sexual Abuse War, commented on child abuse by clergymen and others in positions of trust. It said that the organizations involved appeared to be concerned with limiting the damage to their own image and protecting themselves rather than protecting vulnerable children.
You don't say. That sounds like Jehovah's Witnesses, because they are much more concerned about their own image than they are about the children in their congregations, or in the territory in which they preach. This is positively vile. Our next article is entitled, Who Will Protect Our Children? Not the Witnesses. It's from The Awake in 1999.
It would be naive to think that a simple solution such as legislation will provide complete protection for our children. Many laws have already been passed, and yet the problem persists. It is really an indictment of the world's delinquent adults that the natural right to childhood has to be protected by a vast array of laws.
Oh, okay, well, then let's not do anything about it at all. Let's just keep talking about how terrible it is while aiding and abetting the people perpetrating these crimes in our own organization, protecting them from just punishment and grooming victims for them, and silencing those same victims when they come forward. Legislation won't completely 100% eliminate the problem, so why bother, jerks?
Laws are not the ultimate protection for children. We have only to look at the results of such formidable legislation as the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, to which many governments are signatories. It is well documented that even many of these governments, pushed to the limits by economic constraints, are not doing enough to stop the exploitation of their children. Child abuse continues to be a major international problem.
Yes, it does, and the Jehovah's Witnesses join the throng of other organizations doing absolutely nothing about it. At least the governments are trying to do something to stop it.
Think of the heartbreak of parents who have discovered too late that their children have been abused by trusted clergymen, teachers, or even close family members. It would be good for you as a parent to ask yourself, does my church tolerate or cover up child abuse? Is my religion holding firmly to high moral principles? Answers to such questions could help you to make wise choices in protecting your children.
You absolutely should ask yourself this question, and if you're a Jehovah's Witness, you should ask yourself twice. I imagine how I would feel if I found out someone had molested my child, and there are no words for that kind of rage. I could only wish my parents had cared that much.
Of course, neither laws nor heavier sentences will in themselves protect our children.
Right. Parents have to protect their children, no matter what it takes. But laws and heavy sentences sure are a good deterrent to would-be abusers, aren't they? Unless the abuser already knows that they're going to be protected somehow and they feel safe. Like if they know the elders won't call the police if they find out. Just saying.
The Creator himself, through his inspired word, the Bible, can effectively bring about chaste conduct by changing the thinking of beast-like people into that of loving and moral members of any community.
What, seriously? This is a load of crap, guys. There is more depravity in the Bible than you can shake a stick at. And how many child molesters do you think are going to start reading the Bible and taking it seriously, even if that shit did work? The Bible isn't magic, y'all. It doesn't have any special power to change people. If it did, there wouldn't be any pedophiles. There wouldn't be any murderers. There wouldn't be any crime at all. Mankind would be perfectly moral. But the assumption that the Bible is a moral book at all is just crap. That assumption is made by people who've never read the Bible. It's just not true.
That this is possible has already been shown.
Okay, again, I'm going to need you to cite your sources.
There are many who have abandoned former lecherous lifestyles. They are now providing living proof of the power of God's word.
And many of them embellished their stories to make their worldly selves more wicked and lecherous before they came into the truth. There are some wild stories out there, but don't believe everything you hear, okay? Sure, some people might have turned their lives around, and for them, maybe becoming a Jehovah's Witness was a positive thing, but I'm not buying that this was ever a common occurrence.
But while this is a step in the right direction, the majority of depraved wrongdoers will not change. This is the reason why Jehovah God has promised that all who exploit our children will soon be removed from the earth, along with their philosophies, their lust, and their greed.
So abusers are going to be removed from the earth, along with all their philosophies. So the Jehovah's Witnesses are out then? Changing the subject. Our next article is from the Watchtower in 1999, and it's called Baal Worship. The Battle for the Israelites' Hearts. Okay, I really need to know why the witnesses are so obsessed with Baal. There have been a ton of articles in this video series so far about Baal and his orgies and all that. Where are the other pagan gods? Why ain't Zeus or Eros representing over here? Aphrodite, where you at?
Baal worship pulsed with sexual rites.
Was there any throbbing involved?
Even the religious objects connected with Baal, like the sacred pillars and sacred poles, had sexual connotations. Apparently, the sacred pillars, rocks or hewn stones, in the form of a phallic symbol, represented Baal, the male part of the sexual union.
Oh my!
The sacred poles, on the other hand, were wooden objects or trees that represented Asherah, Baal's consort and the female element.
So the symbols for both Baal and Asherah were phallic in nature? That's interesting.
Temple prostitution and child sacrifice were other prominent aspects of Baal worship. The book The Bible and Archaeology says, in the temples of the Canaanites there were male and female prostitutes, sacred men and women, and all sorts of sexual excesses were practiced.
Oh my. They practiced a lot apparently, but they never did get good at anything.
Canaanites believed that in some way these rites caused the crops and the herds to prosper. That, at least, was the religious justification, although such immorality doubtless appealed to the fleshly desires of the worshippers.
Come on, they didn't really believe that their religious rites caused the crops and herds to prosper. I mean, that would be almost as stupid as believing that buying a lamp or a vacuum cleaner at a yard sale could bring demons in your house or something. They just wanted to hump each other without getting married first. Those hoe bags.
How, then, did Baal seduce the Israelites' hearts?
I hope he at least bought them dinner first.
We can imagine a typical scene in early autumn. In a striking natural setting, gorged by feasting and stimulated by wine, the worshippers dance. Their fertility dance is intended to awaken Baal from his summer inactivity, so that the land will be blessed by rain. Round and round the phallic pillars and sacred poles they go. Their movements, particularly those of the temple prostitutes, are erotic and sensual.
My.
The music and the audience drive them on. And likely at the climax of the dance, the dancers repair to the chambers of the house of Baal for immoral relations.
Well, that sounds kind of anticlimactic, doesn't it? Like, oh, we're dancing, oh, we're dancing, oh, we're dancing, woo-hoo, sexual rights, woo-hoo, sexual rights. That's it, wrap it up, everybody out. We're repairing to the chambers now. It's a bit of a walk, down the mountain, over the river, up the stairs, and into the house, and then up the stairs, fourth hallway on the left, and take a right, then another right, and then a left, but that's the only place we can engage in immoral relations.
Although the worship of Baal has long since disappeared.
You sure? I mean, after that description we just read from the Watchtower, I'm not sure that isn't a first-hand account.
That Canaanite religion and today's society have one thing in common: the glorification of sex.
I don't know. There seems to be more glorification of sex, or at least vilification of it, in Jehovah's Witness literature than anywhere else I can think of.
Enticements to immorality seem to be in the very air that we breathe.
Do you smell something? Is that immorality? Wait, no, that's just bacon.
In today's permissive society, sexual abandon is not practiced as a fertility rite, but rather as a way to find personal fulfillment, or to do one's own thing.
So, like, what are you doing this weekend? Well, me and the girls are going to go do our own thing. You know, sexual abandon. It's so fulfilling, said no one ever.
And the propaganda is just as persuasive. Through entertainment, music, and advertising, sexual messages saturate people's consciousness. God's servants are not immune to this assault.
You don't say. Especially when they never, ever, ever get a break from it. Media's full of sexual content, true. But also, endless reading of articles like this one and listening to talks at the Kingdom Hall with this kind of content. And remember that all ages are hearing this too. Not just adults. Little kids, like kindergartners, and we wonder why Jehovah's Witnesses grow up to have pretty severe sexual hang-ups. Really? Do you really wonder?
In fact, the majority of those disfellowshipped from the Christian congregation are individuals who succumb to such practices. Only by continually repudiating these immoral suggestions will a Christian remain chaste.
I love how they say they've succumbed, as if sexuality is some kind of dread disease. And of course, by such practices, they mean anything sexual at all that isn't perfectly vanilla, Watchtower-approved marital sex. That includes masturbation. It includes having sex if you're in a committed relationship, even if you're engaged but not married. It even includes living with someone of the opposite sex as a roommate, even if you have zero interest in having sex with them and in fact would rather jump off a bridge. Because according to Watchtower, men and women can't be friends without humping each other. Men and women can have no relationships without humping each other. And now here we are, let's throw a party. It's Y2K at last. Did the new millennium usher in a new era of non-freakism for our friends in the Jehovah's Witnesses? Afraid not. Our next article is in the Watching the World segment of The Awake, and it's entitled, Against Her Will.
Of the 304 young women surveyed in a study reported on by the German magazine Psychology Hot, nearly 1/4 said that they had been pressured into some form of sexual activity against their will.
So actually there's a word for that. It's called rape. Why aren't they calling it what it is?
Further, the report notes that more than 1/4 of the women reported that men had tried to use drugs and alcohol to induce them to have involuntary intercourse.
What the fuck is involuntary intercourse? It's called rape, Watchtower.
It adds, taking into account the attempts of young men to erode female resistance by means of psychological pressure, drugs, or alcohol, the odds in favor of a young woman between 17 and 20 being forced into sex against her will,
so rape,
climbed to well over 50%.
All right, so according to this article, 50% of young German women are likely to be raped. Why are they talking about that like it's a good thing? I mean, you don't usually use phrases like the odds being in favor of something if it's a horrible thing like rape. Do you? But then, I guess if you can't really bring yourself to call it rape, then... Then we go right into this jewel, called Who Are Slaves Today? From The Awake in 2000.
The tourist brochure circulating in the United States could not be more straightforward. Sex tours to Thailand. Real girls, real sex, real cheap. Did you know you can actually buy a virgin girl for as little as $200?
Oh my God. They make this sound like it's a tourism brochure in the rack at the bus station or a travel agency or something. Like it's totally legit. This is what we do in the U.S. This is not legitimate, people. I am not doubting that such a thing may have existed somewhere, but for crying out loud, this is nuts. And what kind of stupid predator is going to carry around a brochure about such a thing? Or be even caught looking at it?
What the brochure did not tell is that these virgins have likely been kidnapped or forcibly sold into brothels where they average some 10 to 20 customers a day. If they do not provide sexual services, they are beaten.
Yes, this is a terrible problem, and it does exist. And you know what? Watchtower would do better spending their millions of dollars trying to help solve this problem rather than continuing its own destructive and abusive policies and having to pay out incredible fines and damages to its own victims. If only they would just use their powers for good. Hell, they could even print tips for readers to teach them how to recognize the signs of trafficking and how to stop it. But no, they're not interested in solutions.
When a fire broke out in a brothel on Phuket Island, a resort in southern Thailand, 5 prostitutes burned to death. Why? Because their owners had chained them to their beds to keep them from escaping their bondage.
Like I said, we all know that this is a horror. Why did they need to go into this much detail? Because, once again, this is witness porn.
Women's organizations in Southeast Asia have estimated that from the mid-1970s to the early 1990s, 30 million women were sold worldwide. Traffickers in flesh scour train stations, poor villages, and urban streets looking for young girls and women who appear vulnerable. Usually the victims are uneducated, orphaned, abandoned, or destitute.
Sounds like a disfellowshipped Jehovah's Witness teen to me.
They are given fraudulent promises of work, transported across borders, and then sold into brothels.
Our next article, also from the Awake magazine in the year 2000, is called, Are Morals Worse Than Before? Before what?
According to many commentators, there was a large-scale deterioration of morals during the 20th century.
Oh. Who are these commentators? Are they all at Bethel?
An essay about moral philosophy says, one can clearly see that society's view of sex and what is morally acceptable has changed much in the past 30 to 40 years, from society making clear what is morally correct by means of strict rules to a more free and individualist view.
I wonder what essay this came from. You know, I can't find the source of this quote anywhere. The only thing that comes up when you search it is, you guessed it, Watchtower Online. Are they quoting themselves here? Seriously? And trying to pass it off as a real essay? That would be so typical.
This means that sexual conduct and other aspects of morality are things that most individuals now feel they can decide for themselves.
Why shouldn't they decide for themselves? I mean, seriously, why in the world would anyone be expected to sign over the excruciatingly personal decision of who to have sex with and how to someone else? Especially an elder in a cheap suit. Sex and ethics are both very, very personal things, as they should be. Okay, so our next article is from the Watchtower in 2000. It's called The Little One Has Become 1,000.
Maintaining righteous standards can be especially difficult for the young, when so many of their peers are involved in drug abuse and immorality.
Those nasty worldly people. Ew!
In Suriname, a 14-year-old girl was approached by a good-looking boy at school and invited to have sexual relations.
Was there like an engraved invitation, RSVP card, or was it like an Evite?
She refused, explaining that the Bible forbids such things outside marriage. Other girls at school mocked her and tried to pressure her to change her mind, saying that everyone wanted to sleep with that particular boy. Still, the young girl stood firm.
Dear Penthouse. For real? Do the Watchtower writers really think this is how it goes down? Y'all, this is not how it works. The great majority of teens who have sex do so after establishing a relationship with another teen that they like and have feelings for. The ones who hook up like what they describe here are often called names by other students. They're called sluts, hobags, players. They're not looked up to for that behavior, and girls aren't, as a general rule, going to go around encouraging someone else to sleep with someone they themselves want to sleep with. That's just not how it works. At all.
A few weeks later, the boy was diagnosed HIV positive and became very ill. The girl was happy that she had obeyed Jehovah's command to abstain from fornication.
Oh my God, this is so formulaic that I can't believe anyone actually takes it seriously. These experiences are all the same. If you have sex without being married, you will get pregnant, be jilted, immediately catch AIDS, and die.
Jehovah's Witnesses are very proud of the young ones among them who stand firm for what is right. Their faith and that of their parents beautifies, brings honor to Jehovah God's name.
That's what's important, all right. Beautifying Jehovah's name. I guess not being shunned is just a happy accident then. And not getting AIDS and all that. Our next article is called A Godly View of Moral Cleanness.
In contrast with today's secular world, some in Christendom have taught that sexual relations are shameful, sinful, and that the original sin in the Garden of Eden was the sexual seduction of Adam by Eve. Such a view is contrary to what the inspired scriptures say.
Wait, whoa, I have Watchtower-induced whiplash. In contrast with today's secular world, so they're saying that today's world doesn't teach that sex is shameful, sinful. I'm with them so far, but then Christendom teaches that sexual relationships are shameful, sinful, etc., etc. But wait, isn't that precisely what the Jehovah's Witnesses teach too? What the fuck are they trying to do here?
The Bible record refers to the first human couple as the man and his wife. God told them to have children, saying, "Be fruitful and become many and fill the earth." It would make no sense for God to command Adam and Eve to produce children and then punish them for carrying out those instructions.
Well, God does a lot of things in the Bible that don't make a lot of sense, starting with the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or whatever absurdly long title he gave that particular piece of shrubbery. This senseless gaslighting is exactly what the Jehovah's Witnesses do. This was a Watchtower study article, so there are study questions included for each paragraph. Now, the study question for the next paragraph is,
Why did God give humans sexual powers?
oh my, sexual powers. Oh my God, are we now sexual superheroes?
In that command given to our first parents, which was repeated to Noah and his sons, we see the main purpose of sexual relations, to produce children.
Okay, so this is kind of true. This is, in fact, the biological imperative, but you have to realize that this is filtered through the lens of a primitive people who are trying to guess at the motives of an invisible person in the sky that they made up to explain why the sun comes up in the morning.
However, God's word shows that his married servants are not obliged to limit sexual relations solely to efforts to produce children.
You know, I would be very interested to see where it actually says that exact thing.
Such relations can properly fill emotional and physical needs and be a source of pleasure to a married couple. It is a way for them to express deep affection for each other.
Is anybody else totally grossed out by this source of pleasure thing? It's just so cringy. Ugh. I mean, I just think of these old crusty men with outsized mustaches talking about this from the platform and how the whole congregation would nod like, yes, sexual relations are very pleasurable. The next heading is called
Divine Restraints. While sexuality is a gift from God, it is not to be expressed without restraint.
Wow. I didn't know they were into BDSM. You must be restrained. Wait till you see the new Stoops catalog.
Oh my. This principle applies even within the marriage arrangement.
You don't say.
Outside of marriage, sexual relations are forbidden. The Bible is quite specific on this matter.
Blah, blah, blah. You must not commit adultery. Blah, blah, blah. Injurious reasonings that originate in the heart and defile a person. For fuck's sake.
What is meant by the word fornication? It comes from the Greek word porneia.
Well, here we go again.
Which is sometimes used to apply to sexual relations between unmarried people.
How could any Jehovah's Witness, anywhere, not know what porneia is by this point? This has been covered so many times that everybody in the congregation can probably recite it right along with the reader, especially the ones who've been hauled in the back room for a counseling or a judicial committee recently, especially the sisters. Because whether we were guilty of anything or not, we all know the definition of porneia, because we've been asked all the overly specific questions about it multiple times.
Elsewhere, the term is broader in meaning and refers additionally to adultery, incest, and bestiality. Other sexual practices between individuals not married to each other, such as oral and anal sex and the sexual manipulation of another person's genitalia, can also be designated as porneia. All such practices are condemned, either explicitly or by implication, in God's word.
And once again, we have the utterly inappropriate rundown of all the porneia, read aloud from the platform to the congregation at large, from infants to the elderly. And also keep in mind that all the congregants have already read and studied this at home, underlining the choicest bits in their personal copy of the Watchtower, if they're really spiritual, with different color highlighters. Yes, friends, this is fine spiritual food.
My!
that's it for today. Tune in next time for more incredibly specific discussion of fornication, homosexuality, adultery, bestiality, and other pure Christian topics for your edification and enjoyment. Until then, I'm Sister Fister. This is crazy. You know, they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.